Ever since '87, there's been plenty to love about this guy. Whether you call him Rockman or Mega Man, depending on your location, it's undeniable that the Blue Bomber has had plenty of impact on the gaming scene. Lasting over 30 years with millions of units sold and spawning a couple spin-offs along the way, the Mega Man franchise has paved the way for the action platformers following to emphasize non-linear boss-style structures. And after the release of spiritual successors such as Keiji Inafune's Mighty No. 9 and the recent installment of Mega Man 11, I thought it would be fitting to check out some of the best mechanics this series has offered up in its run. Hey all you super fighting robots, I'm Skip the Tutorial, and this is Game Bites, an analytical appreciation of the best mechanics the gaming has to offer. And hey, if this is your first time here, make sure to Metal Blade that subscribe for new insights every week. Following up the widely praised and heavily regarded sequel, Mega Man 3 has some pretty big shoes to fill. With the series formula well established by this point, the game had to find new ways to innovate in its design, past just drafting a new roster of robot masters to fight against. That kind of stuff only flies in Football Man 18. So given these conditions, this game decided to take the notably combat-oriented franchise into a new bit of platforming depth with the slide mechanic. Out the gate, this new ability switched the whole feel of playing a Mega Man title. You see, the series was built around this sense of deliberate pacing and precision platforming, which meant blocks. Lots of blocks. But implementing the slide added a new bit of speed to this equation, opening up an optimal route for traversal. However, this move brought with it some emergent decisions in combat situations. Since you can't attack while sliding, there's a firm break-off from your typical run or jump button inputs. Yet you can use this move to effectively evade past certain attacks by reducing your physical size. Partnered with the ability to cancel with a jump, this new ability filled out the platforming side in an interesting way, but also gave players more expressiveness in their decision between the combat and movement options of the game. And it's near required that every game with a slide or crawl action accounts for some small spaces in the level design. And there's plenty of secrets chucked into the layouts here, plus some quick navigation as you stay in a steady slide while in these cramped locations. Overall, I think this mechanic's staying power since this title shows how quintessential this design became to the series, opening up new distinctions and strategies for players to explore just past their buster upgrades. Now, this one is a bit tough to pinpoint. The concept of charging a weapon in the Mega Man series had existed in the franchise original sequel through Heatman's atomic fire ability. However, as far as the basis for what the successive games would build off of, then I have to give it to Mega Man 4's Charge Buster Shot. By giving this simple bit of variability in each shot, the game opens up an entirely new factor based around a risk-reward system. Do you choose to level your enemies with a barrage of small pellets, or blast through your foes with Hardy Charge Shot? Having the player constantly consider their damage versus speed output proportions gives each new encounter a level of strategizing that doesn't exist with just one basic buster option. With this new spectrum of weaponry as well, players can always feel like they're prepping for combat, even when they're outside of the fray, and be rewarded when a battle comes for keeping a charged shot in the chamber. And this might seem like a minor point, but I think the nature of how you keep the blast stored through firmly holding on to the shoot button means you're always thinking about it, since there's a constant physical reminder through your controller. And overall, I think with this new strategic planning phase, the game can blend its combat side's relevancy into even the most passive of platforming obstacles. If Mega Man 9 and 10 were like looking at your old yearbook, then Mega Man 11 feels like a proper reunion, getting to show off a new and distinct look while also rocking some extra features for all to see. Following up the lukewarm, to say the least, response of spiritual successor Mighty No. 9, there was definite unease amongst some of the dedicated Mega Man fans that this new title could have fallen in the same way. But if the reviews for this title are anything to look at, the design choices made here definitely paid off in the end. And while there's plenty that stayed the same from the titles in the classic series, and plenty that didn't, I think the most compelling shift in this new take is the double gear system, allowing the player to decide between throwing on an extra damage boost strength upgrade, or a slick slow-mo effect provides some fascinating implications for the jump and shoot basis of the gameplay. Say you're in a tough spot against one of the game's 8 robot masters, well just boot up your buster buff and wreck some serious damage. Or maybe some platforming challenge bobbing and weaving between spikes is snagging too many of your lives. No problem, your speed boost has got you covered. Now at face value, these come across as fairly overpowered new additions to the series. But luckily, the developers tuck in 2 extra bits of design that negate this. First off, the gears heat up, meaning you can't get too reliant on any specific one, or even switching between the two, as the cooldown is shared by both. And if you do overuse the boosts, then you'll have to wait for the ability to fully recharge before banking on it again. In my opinion, this is a really exciting element to add some more stress into fights, as you're constantly nursing these power-ups for all you can without going over the limit. But if this still feels out of place, the button layout customization and nature of the ability allows for veteran purists in the series to never spend a single second with either advantage. It's completely up to you, the player's discretion, as to how and if you implement these new skills, and I think that's a pretty special new breath of life into the series. With every big franchise, you can always bank on some spin-offs tagging along. Now in some cases, this apple might fall pretty nearby, like with Mega Man X, or roll some distance away down the hill and find entirely new footing, and that's where Mega Man Battle Network lies. Straying from the combat-heavy action platformers roots of the series, Battle Network instead pursued a more tactical RPG approach, built around selecting a deck of chips to set up your various attacks and moves to delete your enemies within the executable files. On top of this spin-off series takes what feels like a typical collectible card game style and pumps in some new intrigue through the use of its board layout. Centered around a 6x3 grid system, the maps that the game takes place on split up into two sides, one for you, the player, and the other half for your opponent. Now within the confines of these squares, both fighters will be asked to keep up a steady flow of evasion and attack strategies while hopping from location to location. And I think this concept of constant movement while managing your side provides a new chunk of strategy into the genre. Furthermore, by giving the means for the players to both maneuver and fight in this fairly limited area, the game allows for some exciting situations of balance as you reposition and reevaluate with each new update to the board. Throwing back to the 90s, Capcom was in its definite stride, receiving high notoriety for their franchises across the board. Because of this, you better believe that when one of their titles featured a cameo or reference to an adjacent series, there was plenty of joy to be had, especially before common internet usage could spill all the beans about these to the unaware, leading to the golden era of playground rumors and secrets. And when it comes to this, I think Mega Man X's HADOUKEN reference locked down on all of the necessary aspects for a great call out to Street Fighter. With the tough as nails and frankly convoluted unlock process, first asking the player to beat every boss and collect each upgrade, then having to jump to your death 3 times for a 4th try to finally reveal the new upgrade capsule. Complete with Dr. Light sporting a full Ryu getup, you now have full access to the iconic HADOUKEN ability. I mean, come on, you even get squeaky voiced X saying that classic voice line each time you fire the weapon. It's pure nostalgia. Now, is having this insanely powerful ability a good thing for the overall design? I'd argue that because of its endgame nature, partnered with the more difficult aspects of obtaining and using it only at full health, means that this weapon ultimately hits its mark of being a satisfying bit of catharsis for taking on difficult challenges, while also chucking in a fun wink and nudge to one of fighting's strongest series. Ever since seeing how cool Zero was back in Mega Man X on the SNES, I think it's fair to say that quite a few of us were chomping at the bit to play as this rad character. Who wouldn't want to experience those killer blonde locks, a sweet red suit, and some goofy sounding voice acting? Well, thanks to X4, we all got to live out the fantasy. Now featuring Zero as a fully playable character from alongside series icon, X. From the gate, players are given the option to choose between either choice and play out 2 fairly different routes in the journey. While prior games in the series had given the option to play a taste of him before, this initial option gives a nice shift of pace right before you take your first step. While you could pick X and roll through the game's story with fairly familiar concept of boss weapons after defeating each foe, Zero provides a fresh new perspective on the whole upgrade system. Learning new techniques reminiscent of the bosses, players are asked to take on a whole different perception of their earlier thoughts on Mega Man, just by switching the playable lens. Furthermore, the transition from long-range blasts to up-close and personal combat means that the delineation between the 2 heroes is even bigger, and offers up a nice bit of emergent challenge from the more aggressive playstyle Zero. All in all, I think that opening up these 2 different paths to the player so you can re-experience similar situations in a new outlook makes each strength and weakness of the respective characters that much more emphasized, and gives a new shot of excitement into the series' formula as a whole. It's quite the feat to survive to even be a franchise, let alone one that survives for an astounding 30 years in the gaming industry. Heck, just watching your series evolve from the NES palette to 3D isometrics is something to see in and of itself. And when you're around for that kind of history, it takes something special in the gameplay, and that's where the series' coveted boss weakness system comes into play. After defeating one of the game's respective robot masters, you receive a new weapon ability themed around your defeated foe. And while this does on a surface level allow for some more variation when blasting through the other goons and baddies, with each of these buster upgrades comes a new strength in beating another boss. From this stems one of the most compelling incentives for replaying these games, boss orders, being where the player drafts their own optimal routes through these battles for peak efficiency. Granted, this loses some of its original charm when you can just look up the agreed upon best path from any top result at Google walkthrough, but this catch-all result might just not fit how you deal with the fights. And your own strengths and weaknesses with the gameplay could push you to plan out your own route anyway. The non-linearity that you play through these bosses with reaffirms this concept too, as curiosity and testing are encouraged with each new deviation you choose to take from your typical run. And of course, I'd be remiss not to bring up the pure satisfaction that comes from playing through these games' concluding boss rushes. and the subsequent power trips derived from blasting an optimal path through the baddies one last time. Hey there. If you want to score a new Game Bites ability about Nitrome's best designs, take on this one in the top right, or slide into the bottom right for another video. If you want to support the channel and snag new videos every week, crash bomb the subscribe button. But until then, take care, and you have a good one, alright?